"We did not order for you," my daughter-in-law said as she slid a breadbasket across the table toward me. Her voice was light, almost bored, as if she were reminding a waitress of a forgotten napkin. Her family was already cutting into $100 steaks, the smell of seared meat drifting between their plates. My son did not even look at me when he added, "You should have eaten before coming, Mom." No one else at the table reacted, not the waiter, not the kids, not even Bryn's parents. It was the kind of scene that happens quietly, efficiently, the way people swat a fly without pausing their conversation. But the way that basket stopped in front of me felt like someone had set down a verdict. My name is Marina Kessler. I am 62 years old. I kept my hands folded in my lap, because if I touched the basket too quickly, they would think I was grateful. And if I pushed it away, they would think I was dramatic. Years of practice had taught me how to take an insult without letting it show. Chin steady, breath sway, eyes soft. I had made myself small so many times that shrinking had become muscle memory. Caleb, my only child, shifted in his seat, not out of guilt, no. Guilt requires recognition. This was something else. A faint discomfort. The kind people feel when a stranger coughs too loudly in a quiet room. He lifted his glass, drank, and turned to Bryn as if my presence had already been accounted for and dismissed. I thought about the little gift bag in my purse, the one with the framed photo I had printed of Caleb and the twins at the pumpkin patch last fall. I had placed it gently in tissue paper, wanting to bring something small that said I remembered, that I cared. I had not expected anything back, but I had hoped quietly, foolishly, for warmth. Bryn passed salt to her father and laughed at something he said. Her bracelets clinked together. A bright sound in a dim room. She never looked my way. I wondered, briefly, if she even realized what she had done. Or if this too was just another line in the growing script of keeping me at arm's length. The waiter returned with a polite smile, ready to take additional orders. His pen hovered, eyes moving around the table before landing on me. For a moment, I felt the familiar urge to wave him off, to say I was fine, to prove once again that I did not need anything, that I was easy, but something inside me, small, tired, persistent, shifted. Not loudly, not dramatically, just a slow, internal settling, as if a stone had finally reached the bottom of a lake. I lifted my eyes to the waiter. "I am ready," I said softly. Caleb looked up then, finally noticing me. Bryn's chewing slowed. It was nothing more than a moment, barely a breath, but it was the first time in years that I felt the ground tilt in my direction, even if only by an inch. The waiter nodded, waiting for my order. I did not give it yet. I wanted to feel this moment settle fully into my bones, the moment before something changes, before a line is drawn and cannot be erased. I closed my fingers around the edge of my napkin, feeling the fabric press back against my skin, steady and familiar. The shift had begun, even if they did not see it yet, and as the waiter's pen hovered above his pad, ready to write, I understood that the life I had lived up until this dinner was not the life I would continue carrying into tomorrow. After the dinner, I drove home without turning on the radio. The silence made it easier to hear the thoughts I spent years pushing aside. It was strange how one sentence from Bryn, one shrug from Caleb, could peel back decades of memories with the ease of lifting a tablecloth. When I stepped into my small townhouse, the familiar creak of the entryway reminded me why I had chosen this place. It was the home I could afford after my husband, Eric, died. A heart attack, sudden and merciless. Caleb had just turned 12. I remembered standing in the hospital hallway, numb, listening to a doctor explain timelines and probabilities while my son sat beside me, tracing circles on the floor with his shoe. We went home that night, Just the two of us. Eric's coat still hung by the door. Caleb touched the sleeve and whispered, "Is it okay if I cry now?" I held him so tightly. My arms trembled. "Yes, sweetheart. You cry as long as you need." We rebuilt our lives from that moment forward. I worked double shifts in medical billing, sometimes taking contract work on weekends. When Caleb needed braces, I picked up overnight data entry. When he wanted to join baseball, I sold my grandmother's ring. I told myself it was worth it, that giving him a childhood with moments of joy mattered more than anything I kept for myself. He used to look at me differently back then, like I was the world's safest place. When he was 17, I was offered a supervisory promotion at the clinic, better pay, more responsibility, and the first step toward the kind of career I had always imagined but never reached for. But taking the job meant longer hours, and Caleb's grades had started slipping. His guidance counselor had pulled me aside and said he seemed adrift. That night, he came home late, shoulders heavy, backpack hanging half open. "I do not think college is for me," he muttered. I cupped his face gently. "Then we will figure it out." The promotion email sat unanswered in my inbox for 3 days before I declined it. I told my supervisor I needed to be present for my son. She nodded kindly, not knowing what it cost me. Years passed. Caleb found his footing, got his associate's degree, met Bryn through a friend in Denver. The first time I met her, she shook my hand and said, "Caleb tells me you are strong." That must have been helpful. The pause after helpful stung more than I admitted. I thought strength would earn respect. Instead, it became something everyone expected from me without offering anything back. Sitting alone in my kitchen now, the memory of Bryn's voice at the restaurant echoed through me, quiet but sharp. Somewhere along the way, love had shifted into obligation, something no one even remembered I was giving. Bryn's distancing did not happen all at once. It began with a tone, a glance, a shift in posture whenever I stepped into their apartment. The first time I visited after they married, she opened the door only halfway and said, "Oh, hi, Marina. We were not expecting you right now." Caleb appeared behind her, smiling too broadly, like someone trying to soften a blow. "I brought the casserole you like," I said, lifting the dish. Bryn nodded politely, but her eyes moved to Caleb. "Maybe next time you should text first," she murmured. Caleb scratched his cheek, avoiding my gaze. "Yeah, Mom. Just so we have a heads up." It stung, but I told myself they were adjusting to newlywed life. A few weeks later, I offered to help them move furniture in their living room. Bryn crossed her arms. "We have it handled," she said. "I do not want the space getting cluttered with too many opinions." Caleb laughed lightly. "She means decor opinions. Mom, you know how she is?" But Bryn's eyes never left mine. I understood the message. When Bryn became pregnant, the gap widened. I asked Caleb gently, "Will you two need anything for the baby?" "We are fine," Bryn answered before he could speak. Her hand rested protectively on her stomach. "We want to do this on our own. Too many people giving advice stresses me out." I blinked, unsure when I had become too many people. Caleb cleared his throat. "It is true. Mom, we want to try things our way." "I understand," I said softly, but Bryn's lips tightened, as if any understanding from me felt like an intrusion. After the twins were born, I offered again to help, even for an hour. Bryn tapped her phone and said, "We have a babysitter list the hospital recommended. We are good." Caleb added, "Bryn's mom is coming next week. She wants to be the first to watch them." My hands folded in my lap. Invisible. Of course, that makes sense. Months passed. Each interaction carried a subtle push. A canceled dinner because Bryn was exhausted. A birthday invitation that never arrived. A holiday brunch where Caleb said, "Maybe keep visits short. The babies get overstimulated." I tried to stay patient, tried to believe they were overwhelmed, tried not to see the tightening circle around their new family one with no space left for me. But the clearest sign came one Sunday afternoon. I stopped by with a small bag of toys the twins could grow into. Nothing expensive, just something I thought they might like. Bryn opened the door, stepping outside rather than letting me in. "Next time," she said, "text before coming. Drop-ins do not really work for us." I did text. I replied quietly. "Yesterday." She blinked, then smiled, thin and stiff. "Right. Well, we need space. Marina. That is all." "Space." Caleb appeared behind her, holding one of the twins. "Mom, it is not personal." I looked at my son, his tired eyes, the way he shifted nervously from one foot to the other. The small plea in his voice for me not to make this harder. "I will give you your space," I said. Bryn exhaled like she had been holding her breath for hours. "Thank you," she whispered, relief softening her shoulders. They closed the door gently, but it still felt like it pushed me backward. Walking to my car, I told myself they were learning to balance their new life. I told myself I did not want to overwhelm them. I told myself space was normal. But the word echoed long after I drove away, hollow and echoing, as if it were hiding something sharp behind it, something I had been trying unsuccessfully not to see. The invitation came late on a Thursday evening. I was settling into bed when my phone buzzed with a short message from Caleb. "Dinner Saturday. Something to celebrate. You should come." No details, no time, no explanation. But it had been weeks since I last saw them, so I replied, "Of course." "What time?" He responded nearly 20 minutes later. 6? Bryn says casual. Casual. Bryn never used that word unless she was already annoyed. But I told myself not to overthink it. Maybe things were changing. Maybe they wanted to include me again. I let that hope take up space in my chest, warm and familiar. The next morning, I stopped by a small local shop near Old Town and bought a framed print of Horsetooth Reservoir, Caleb's favorite hiking spot growing up. He used to race ahead of me on the trail, shouting, "Bet you cannot catch me, Mom." His laugh had echoed across the water. I thought the picture might mean something to him now, a reminder of a time when we were still close. The shop owner wrapped it carefully. "A gift," she asked. "For my son," I said. My voice softened without permission. On Saturday evening, I arrived at the restaurant 10 minutes early. I texted Caleb that I was there. His reply came seconds later. "We are already seated." When I reached the table, Bryn's parents were gathering their coats. Her mother gave me a polite smile, the kind she used with bank tellers and store clerks. "Oh, Marina," she said, "we were just heading out. We had other plans tonight." Bryn stood beside her, smoothing the napkin on her lap. "I know it is last minute," she said, "but they had a dinner to get to. It ended up being perfect timing for you to join us afterward. Perfect timing." Like I was a placeholder, a substitute, an interchangeable part to slot in when the original piece fell out. Caleb reached for a roll in the breadbasket. "Mom, you made it," he said lightly, as if the situation were normal, as if I had not just walked into the absence left by someone else. I set the gift bag beside my chair. "I brought something for you two," I said. Bryn glanced at it once, then looked back at her menu. "We can open it later," she murmured. "They want to take our order." A waiter approached, pen ready, before I could lift my eyes. Bryn leaned toward him and said, "Just the usual for us, and she is fine with bread." I blinked. "Actually, I have not ordered yet." Bryn interrupted softly. "We were trying to keep things simple." The waiter hesitated, unsure where to look. Caleb cleared his throat. "Mom does not mind, right?" His voice carried that familiar note, the one that asked me to make things easy, to shrink, to smooth the edges so no one else had to feel discomfort. I nodded once, Not because it was true, but because pushing back in that moment felt like stepping off a cliff. The waiter left. Bryn smiled at Caleb. Bryn's parents walked out. I sat there holding a framed memory of a boy who used to run beside me, not ahead of me. I should have declined the invitation, but I came anyway, because a part of me still believed there was room for warmth at this table. The waiter returned with his notepad tucked against his apron, the kind of polite smile worn by someone who has learned to read tension without letting it show. He looked between Bryn, Caleb, and then me. "Are we ready to add anything to the order?" he asked gently. Bryn straightened. "No additional items. We are good." I heard the dismissal in her tone, quick, efficient, designed to move past me. But my hand lifted before she finished. "I am not," I said. The waiter paused. Caleb's fork clinked against his plate. Bryn's eyebrows tightened, a small, irritated pinch between them. "Mom," Caleb whispered. "We already handled the order." "No," I said, my voice steady. "You handled yours." Bryn gave a thin laugh. "Marina, I told him you were fine with bread. We are trying to keep this simple." "I heard you," I replied, "but you do not get to speak for me." The table fell silent. Even the twins looked up. The waiter cleared his throat. "Would you like to see the menu again, ma'am?" "No need." I folded my napkin carefully, letting the motion ground me. "I will have the ribeye, medium rare, with truffle fries, and a side salad with the house dressing." The waiter nodded quickly, grateful for clear direction. Bryn stared at me as if I had overturned the table. Caleb leaned forward. "Mom, are you sure the ribeye is—" "I know what it is," I interrupted, "and I am ordering it." He swallowed, embarrassed. "Okay. I just thought we agreed this was a light dinner." "You agreed," I said quietly. "Not me." The waiter turned to leave, but I lifted my hand again. "One more thing," I said, looking directly at him. "Cancel anything that has not reached the kitchen, and anything already prepared. Please put it on my son's bill. He invited me tonight." The waiter froze. Bryn's jaw dropped. Excuse me. That is not how this works." Caleb flushed a deep red. "Mom, what are you doing?" I finally looked at him, not as the boy I raised, but as the man who had let someone else dictate how his mother should be treated. "You invited me," I said softly. I accepted. "And then you and Bryn decided I should sit here with a basket of bread while everyone else eats a meal. If you are hosting, you cover your guests." Bryn scoffed. "This is childish." "No," I said, meeting her eyes. "This is boundaries." The waiter hesitated, unsure whether to step forward or backward. Caleb rubbed his forehead. Bryn whispered something sharp under her breath. I sat straighter. "Go ahead," I told the waiter. "Put it on Caleb's tab." He nodded, almost relieved to have a direction, and hurried away. Across the table, Bryn leaned toward Caleb. "Are you going to say something?" Caleb looked torn, caught between the woman he married and the mother he did not want to confront. "Mom," he said slowly, "you made this uncomfortable." I took a sip of water. "I did not make this uncomfortable, Miu," I responded. Bryn laughed once, incredulous. "You really think you were wronged here?" "I know I was." My voice did not rise, did not break. It simply existed, solid, finally. After so many years of bending for others, for the first time since walking into that restaurant, Caleb looked truly at me. Not past me, not through me, at me. "Mom," he said again, but the word carried uncertainty instead of command. I pressed my napkin flat against my lap and spoke with the calmest voice I had ever used in front of them. "This is the last time I sit quietly while you decide what I deserve." Bryn's mouth tightened. Caleb leaned back, unsettled. The twins whispered to each other, sensing a shift, even if they could not name it. And I felt it too, the unmistakable flicker of something returning to me, something I had let erode over years of silence. Strength. Not the kind people praised me for because it made their lives easier. The kind that belonged to me. When the waiter returned with drinks, Bryn refused to look at him. Caleb stared at the table. I took my glass without apology. The dynamic had changed. Not loudly, but unmistakably. I had finally stood up, and none of them knew what that meant for the night ahead. I had barely turned the key in my front door when my phone buzzed for the first time. I set my purse down, slipped off my shoes, and before I could even take a breath, it rang again. Caleb's name lit up the screen. I let it go to voicemail. A third call came immediately after, then a fourth. By the fifth, I answered not because I wanted to, but because if I did not, he would keep calling until dawn. His voice burst through the speaker. "Mom, what the hell was that?" I placed the phone on the counter and pressed it to speaker mode. "I am home now." I said, "If you want to talk, talk. But I'm not doing this shouting. You embarrassed us," he said. "Do you understand that Bryn was mortified?" I ordered dinner. I replied, "That is all." "You humiliated me in front of my wife," he snapped. I leaned against the counter. "Steady. Caleb, you invited me. Then you told the waiter I did not need a meal." That is not what happened. It is exactly what happened. On the other end, I heard him inhale sharply, the way he used to before arguing with teachers in high school. "You could have talked to me privately," he said. "Instead, you acted like a victim." "I acted like your mother," I said softly. "A mother who deserved a seat at the table." He hesitated long enough for me to know the words landed. But he pushed past them anyway. "You should have asked before reversing the bill. Bryn's parents think we cannot afford anything now. That was not my concern tonight." "Well, it should be," he shot back. "When you do things like this, it makes us look weak. You put us in a terrible position." "I did not put you in any position." I said, "That was done long before I stood up." He exhaled loudly. "So this is how it is going to be. You punishing us for trying to set boundaries." That word again. Boundaries. As if kindness were a threat. As if presence were intrusion. No one was punished. I said, "I simply made a choice." "You are being dramatic." I closed my eyes for a moment. "I am being honest." There was a long silence. Then, "You know what? Mom Bryn thinks we should take a break from dinners for a while. She is upset. I am upset. We need space." I almost laughed, not because it was funny, but because they had been taking space from me for years. "That is fine," I said. He paused, thrown off by my agreement. "Fine. Yes, take whatever space you need." He waited, expecting more. An explanation, an apology, something to soften the edges for him, but I had no edges left to sand down. "Finally," he said, quieter this time. "I do not know what has gotten into you. Nothing has gotten into me," I said. Something left. "What does that mean?" I did not answer. "Mom, I am asking you a question. I heard you, and I am going to bed." "Caleb." Silence stretched across the line. "You cannot just hang up on me." "I can tonight." And I did, for the first time in years. I did not call back. I did not send a smoothing text message. I did not check to see if he was angry, hurt, or confused. I turned off my phone, climbed into bed, and let the quiet settle around me like something earned. Somewhere in the darkness, I realized how quickly people panic when the person they rely on to stay small finally chooses not to shrink anymore. They came the next morning. I had just poured coffee when a sharp knock rattled the front door, 3 quick hits. Impatient. I knew that knock. Caleb only knocked that way when he was angry and trying not to show it. I opened the door to see him standing stiffly on the porch. Bryn right beside him with sunglasses on despite the cloudy sky. She held a white envelope between two fingers like it was something unpleasant she did not want touching her. "Mom," Caleb said. Voice clipped. "We need to talk." I stepped aside. "Come in." They entered without removing their shoes. Bryn set the envelope on the kitchen counter with a pointed tap. "That is the restaurant bill," she said. "Your portion." "My portion," I repeated, keeping my voice even. "Yes," she said. "Half? You ordered an expensive meal and forced the rest onto us. It is only fair." Caleb crossed his arms, looking anywhere but at me. "Mom, you put me in a terrible spot last night. I had no idea you were going to do that." I leaned against the counter. "You told the waiter I would not be eating." Bryn lifted her chin. "We thought it was understood. You always say you are not hungry at restaurants. That does not mean I agreed to be skipped entirely." Caleb finally looked at me. "You made a scene. I made a choice." I corrected. "A choice not to be dismissed." Bryn scoffed. "This is ridiculous. You embarrassed us. And now we are asking you to pay your part." I opened the envelope. The total stared back at me, written neatly in black ink, without symbols, without shortcuts. $1,200. I set the paper down. "You came here early in the morning for this." "Yes," Bryn said sharply. "Because financially, this matters to us." I glanced at Caleb. His jaw tightened. "Mom," he said quietly, "we are not made of money. You know that." A long breath left me. "I do know that. I have always known that." His brows pulled together. "What is that supposed to mean? You two have struggled for years. I have helped quietly, without asking for anything." Bryn folded her arms. "We did not ask for handouts." "No," I said, "but you accepted them." Caleb shook his head. "That has nothing to do with last night." "It has everything to do with last night." I said, "This bill is not about money. It is about respect." "That is dramatic." Bryn snapped. I walked to the drawer near the fridge, pulled out a small binder, and placed it on the counter. It was worn, the cover bending from years of opening and closing. Caleb frowned. "What is that, records?" I said, "I kept them because I needed to remember where my money went when things got tight." I opened the binder. Pages of notes, dates, and amounts filled the sheets. 6 years ago, I said softly, I paid your overdue rent. $1,400. Caleb's face drained of color. 4 years ago, I covered your car repairs. $800. Bryn shifted uncomfortably. That was different. 3 years ago, I continued. I helped with your credit card debt. $2,300. Caleb's voice cracked. Mom, stop. I looked at him gently. Last Christmas, your twins' gifts. All from me. You said you would pay me back. He swallowed hard, eyes glistening. We were going through things. I know, I said. And I helped because you are my son. Bryn's voice was barely above a whisper. Why are you bringing this up now? This feels like an attack. No, I said. This is context. I closed the binder. You came here demanding half of a bill from a dinner where you refused to let me eat. You want a reason, you already know it. Caleb lowered his gaze to the counter. The envelope between us like a wound neither of us knew how to treat. Bryn stepped back, her face tightening. We should go, she muttered. But Caleb did not move. He looked at me with something raw in his eyes. Shame, anger, confusion tangled so tightly they were impossible to tell apart. This is not about the money. He said quietly. I know, I replied. And the silence that followed told both of us exactly how much deeper this fracture truly ran. Bryn stared at the binder as if it were something toxic leaking across my kitchen counter. What is all this supposed to prove? She asked, her voice sharp, brittle. I opened to the first page. The paper had softened over the years, but the ink was clear. "This," I said quietly, "is where the money went when you asked for help." "We did not ask," Bryn snapped. Caleb shifted. "Bryn, you did not say the words," I said. "But you came to me." "That counts." I slid the page toward them. "5 years ago, your rent. $1,400. Caleb's throat bobbed as he read the handwriting. "I told you we would pay that back." "You never did." I said. "And I never pressed you." Bryn crossed her arms. "We were newly married. Couples struggle. That is normal." I turned another page. 3 years ago, your emergency dental bill, Caleb. $600, you called me at 2 in the morning. He winced. "I remember. I did not tell anyone." I continued. I did not complain. Bryn tried to gather herself. "Everyone helps family. You are treating this like a transaction." "No," I said, meeting her eyes. "I am treating it like a pattern." I flipped another page. Your car repairs $800. Your utilities one winter $370. Groceries when the twins were born. I kept the receipts. Bryn. Not to shame you, but to understand why my own bank account kept dipping. Bryn's jaw tightened. Why keep all this? Who does that? Someone who pays attention. I said, someone who has to plan. Caleb rubbed the back of his neck. Okay, Mom, we get it. You helped. Why are you throwing this in our faces? Now I am not throwing anything. I answered. You came to my door with a bill for $1,200 because I ordered dinner. You marched in here as if I owed you something. I needed you to remember that I have been giving for years. Bryn let out a low, stunned laugh. Unbelievable. You think feeding us a list of old debts makes last night okay? No, I said plainly. Last night was not about debts. It was about how easily you decided I did not deserve a meal. Caleb looked down at his hands. His voice came out strained. We were trying to keep things simple. Simple for you, I said. His head snapped up. Defensiveness rising. Mom, Bryn and I have had a rough year, with the twins, with money, with everything. You do not know how stressful it is. I do, I said softly. I know because I lived the same stress with you, except I did not push you away. The room fell quiet. Caleb swallowed hard, shame flickering across his face. He reached for the binder, flipping pages. When he reached the section with the twins' first-year expenses, he stopped. You kept the receipts for their formula, he asked, voice shaking. Yes, I said, because I was the one buying it. Bryn stepped closer to him. Caleb, do not let her guilt you. This is manipulative. He closed the binder as if it burned. Why keep records if you were going to use them against us, he demanded. I kept them, I said, because they were proof I mattered. When you forget someone's efforts long enough, they start to doubt themselves. His face darkened. So this is about attention? No. I said, it is about acknowledgement. Bryn exhaled sharply. We came here for a simple conversation. Not this. I nodded. You came here for money. Instead, you found the truth. Caleb looked at the envelope, at the binder, then at me, anger, guilt. Resistance twisting together until he could not tell them apart. He grabbed Bryn's arm. We should go. They headed for the door. Caleb paused just long enough to look back. Eyes tight, voice low. You should have talked to us before doing all this. I tried. I said, for years. He said nothing more. The door closed behind them with a hollow click. The binder still open on my counter, every line of ink a reminder of the truth they were trying so hard not to face. I was folding laundry when the knock came, slow, measured, the kind people use when they expect resistance on the other side. I wiped my hands on my jeans and opened the door. 2 women stood on my porch. Both wore laminated badges and calm, practiced expressions. Me, Marina Kessler, one asked. Yes, I am Agent Howell, and this is Agent Diaz. We are with Adult Protective Services. We received a report and need to speak with you. A coldness slid down my spine. A report about what Agent Howell glanced at her clipboard. Concerns about your ability to care for yourself, claims of unsafe living conditions, inability to maintain hygiene, disorientation, potential food insecurity. My mouth went dry. That is not true. We understand, she said gently. These calls can come from misunderstandings, but once submitted, we are required to check. Agent Diaz looked past me, into the house. May we come in? Ma'am, I stepped aside slowly, my fingers shaking as I held the door open. Inside, they scanned the room, the carpet vacuumed, the dishes clean, the couch arranged neatly. I watched Agent Howell's eyes soften, then flick toward me with quiet understanding. Who submitted it? I asked. Agent Diaz shook her head. Reports are anonymous. Anonymous. But the word felt unnecessary. I knew exactly who had done it. Caleb's face flashed in my mind, tight jaw, restless hands, the way shame had turned into anger yesterday. Bryn's clipped tone, the way she had said, "You cannot guilt us with a list of old debts." Agent Howell opened my refrigerator. It was stocked, organized. She nodded approvingly. "We are not seeing any signs of neglect," she said. "But we need to ask a few questions," I answered. "Yes, I drive myself. Yes, I manage my medications. Yes, I cook and clean. Yes, I have supportive neighbors. No, I have never been disoriented or in danger." Agent Diaz took notes, her pen barely making a sound. When they finished, Agent Howell closed her folder. "Ms. Kessler, may we speak plainly?" "Yes," I whispered. "These kinds of reports sometimes happen during family disputes." She said carefully, "It is not uncommon." Pain flared at the back of my throat. "My son is angry with me." She nodded gently. "We cannot confirm who called, but the details matched someone familiar with you. Someone who knows exactly how I live." I said. Agent Diaz stepped closer, her voice kind. "You have nothing to worry about. We will mark this as unfounded. You are clearly capable and safe. Safe." The word felt strangely distant. They thanked me and left. The door closed softly behind them. But the room felt suddenly loud, filled with the echo of a violation I could not quite absorb. I sat at the kitchen table, gripping the edge until my knuckles whitened. The last time anyone questioned my ability to care for myself was after Eric died, when neighbors hovered too close, offering casseroles and pity. Caleb had been 12, clinging to my arm, begging people to stop saying I might not manage on my own. Back then, he defended me. Now he, or someone speaking for him, was telling strangers I could not be trusted in my own home. My hands trembled, not from fear, from something deeper, older, the kind of wound you feel in your lungs because it steals the air before you can breathe it. I picked up my phone. No messages from Caleb. None from Bryn. Not even an apology disguised as explanation. They had not called to check if I was okay. They had not warned me. They had not thought twice about what this could do. I stood slowly, walked to the sink, and splashed cold water on my face. It steadied me. But it did not ease the heaviness still pressing against my ribs. There was only one thought left clear, sharp, impossible to ignore. If my own child could turn a system against me, then I needed to learn how to protect myself from the people I raised. I made it through the rest of the day on muscle memory alone, watering the plants, wiping the counters, folding the last of the laundry I had abandoned when the agents arrived. But every small task felt thin, fragile, like it could split open if I pressed too hard. By evening, The house was quiet. Too quiet. I sat on the edge of my bed, hands clasped between my knees, listening to the distant hum of a passing car. The room felt colder than usual, as if grief had settled into the walls themselves. My phone buzzed once. A message from a neighbor checking in. I ignored it. I lay back slowly, staring at the ceiling. The silence finally cracked me open. I pressed the heel of my hand to my chest as a sob rose hard and fast, so sudden it startled me. I tried to breathe through it, but the hurt lodged deep, catching in my throat like something with claws. I whispered into the dark, "Caleb, why?" My voice sounded unfamiliar, small in a way I did not recognize. I curled onto my side, pulling my knees to my chest like I had once done after Eric died. Except this time, the grief was sharper, lonelier. It was one thing to lose a husband to death. It was another to lose a child to choice. A cry tore out of me, the kind that comes from a place beneath words. I pressed a pillow over my mouth, muffling the sound, but my body shook anyway. My ribs ached, my eyes burned. I felt the years catch up to me all at once. I remembered Caleb at 5 years old, running into my arms after scraping his knee, sobbing into my shirt. I remembered him at 12, hugging me so tightly after Eric's funeral that I nearly dropped the box of tissues I was holding. I remembered him at 17, leaning into me after a breakup, his voice cracking. "You are all I have, Mom." How did we get from that boy to the man who sent strangers to my home to evaluate if I could care for myself? I wiped my face with shaking hands. It was not anger that broke me. It was the mourning of the son I once had, the mourning of the years I spent building a life around him, the mourning of the belief that love alone could protect a bond. The tears slowed eventually, but the ache remained. I tried to steady my breathing. My chest felt bruised, tender from the waves that had crashed through me. I walked into the kitchen for water. The floor felt cold under my feet. I leaned against the counter, letting the cool glass sit against my palm while I inhaled shakily. The front porch light flickered on automatically, a sensor picking up nothing but the wind. I stared at the glow through the window, remembering how Caleb used to run up the steps 2 at a time when he came home late, shouting, "Mom, I am here." Now he did not come at all. A small, steady voice inside me, one I had ignored for years, whispered what I had been avoiding. "I cannot fix him. I cannot fix this. And I cannot keep breaking myself to make room for the people who hurt me." I turned off the kitchen light and let the darkness settle around me. Love had become a wound, and I was finally beginning to feel just how deep it ran. I did not sleep much after the welfare agents left. By morning, the air in my house felt heavy, as if it were holding its breath with me. I made coffee I could barely swallow, then sat at the table staring at my phone until I finally pressed the number my neighbor Jill had given me the night before. She helped my cousin with a custody mess. Jill had said, "She does not sugarcoat things. You need that now." The attorney answered on the second ring. "This is Karen Doyle." Her voice was calm, firm, the kind that sounded used to hearing people in crisis. "Ms. Doyle," I said, "my name is Marina. I need help with something. Tell me what happened." She said, I told her about the dinner, the bill, the binder, the report, the agents in my doorway. She did not interrupt, did not sigh, did not gasp. She only said, "I see. When can you come in today?" I whispered. "Good. 11 o'clock. Bring any documentation that supports your version of events." When I arrived, Karen's office was small but warm. Shelves lined with case files and framed photos of her 2 sons. She shook my hand once, firmly, then gestured for me to sit. "You look exhausted," she said. "Let's start by taking back control." I handed her the binder. She flipped through it slowly. You keep detailed records, she noted. I learned to, I said. She opened a legal pad. We are going to draft a cease and desist letter. It will address the harassment and the false report. But before we do that, I need to ask something difficult. I nodded. Have you accepted that this may permanently change your relationship with your son? A tremor passed through me, but I held her gaze. It already changed. Karen leaned back. Then we proceed. She began writing, reading each line aloud for my approval. Caleb Kessler and Bryn Kessler are hereby formally notified. Any further attempts to intimidate, harass, or make knowingly false reports will be met with immediate legal escalation. Hearing their names written into a legal document felt surreal, like crossing a threshold I could never step back from. When she finished, she slid the draft across the desk. Read it. Tell me if anything feels untrue or unfair. I scanned the lines. Every word felt heavier than the last. It is all accurate. I said, good. We will send the final version by certified mail. Karen folded her hands. Now, let us talk next steps. They might respond with denial, they might attempt to flip the narrative, or they may escalate. Escalate how? My voice wavered despite me. Some families try to pursue visitation claims or protective orders when confronted, she said, but do not panic. These situations often collapse under evidence. I just want them to stop hurting me. I said, that, Karen replied, is exactly why we draw lines. She paused, softening. You deserve peace, Marina. But you also deserve to feel protected. We will make sure you are. I looked down at my hands. They were steady. For the first time in weeks, maybe months, I felt something shifting inside me. Not anger, not fear. Resolve. When Karen stood to walk me out, she placed a hand lightly on my shoulder. Go home, rest, and do not engage with them directly. When they reach out, and they will send everything to me. Outside, the sky was gray, the air cold, but the heaviness in my chest was lighter. I stepped onto the sidewalk feeling strangely taller, as if reclaiming my own boundaries had added inches to my spine. I went home, placed the certified letter on the counter, and stared at it for a long moment. A line had been drawn, not in anger, but in finality. And once I crossed it, I understood there was no returning to who I had been before. The cease and desist letter arrived at their house on a Tuesday. I knew because Caleb called that same evening. I did not answer. Karen had told me not to. She handled it, sending him a brief message. All communication will go through my office moving forward. 2 days later, Karen called me. Marina, she said, I need you to come in. They have responded. My stomach tightened. What did they say? They filed a petition in county court. Her voice was controlled, but not surprised. They are seeking visitation rights. I leaned against the kitchen counter, gripping the edge. Visitation. For what I am not keeping their children from them. It is not about that, Karen said. They are claiming you are emotionally unstable and have cut off family access in retaliation. A laugh broke out of me. Raw. They sent adult protective services to my house. I know, she said softly. This is their attempt to regain leverage. When I arrived at her office, she handed me the papers. Caleb's signature was scrawled at the bottom. Bryn's handwriting appeared beside it, precise, practiced. The document read like a story told backward. Marina is unpredictable. Marina is isolating herself. Marina refused communication. Marina is a danger to family harmony. My chest tightened. They are lying. They are posturing, Karen corrected. And hoping you will fold. We sat across from each other, the blinds drawn against the cold afternoon light. Why visitation, I asked. Karen chose her words carefully. Sometimes parents file these petitions when they want to establish a paper trail. It can make them appear reasonable if conflicts escalate. Or, she continued, they may need childcare help and are trying to force access without apologizing. My breath caught. Childcare. Bryn's work schedule has shifted, Karen said. I checked public records. She recently left her job at the marketing firm. She may be struggling to balance the twins. A memory flickered Bryn snapping at the restaurant. The shadows under her eyes, the tightness around her mouth. She wants help, I said quietly, but refuses to ask. And instead, Karen said, she is forcing it. We examined the petition line by line. Every accusation twisted the truth just enough to sting without collapsing in court. They wrote, I am unstable. I whispered. Karen looked at me steadily. They wrote what they needed to justify control. The air in the office felt heavier. This was no longer about a dinner or a bill. This was about rewriting a story in which they were the heroes, and I was the problem. What do we do? I asked. We respond, she said, clearly and directly. We attach evidence. The welfare report marked unfounded, the binder. Your medical records. Witness statements if needed. Should I reach out to Caleb? I asked, even though I already knew the answer. No, she said firmly. He made this a legal issue. You do not negotiate privately anymore. I nodded, though something inside me pulsed painfully. Something that remembered a little boy in a baseball uniform shouting, Mom, watch me. Karen touched the petition with the tip of her pen. This is not about you being dangerous. This is about you no longer being compliant. The word lodged in my chest. She handed me a folder containing our draft response. Sign where flagged. We file tomorrow. I picked up the pen. My hand hesitated not from fear of them, but from grief for what we had become. Then I pressed the pen to the page. One signature, one line crossed, one more step into a world where control mattered more to them than family. And nothing I did now would change the truth of that. Karen told me to gather anything that showed who I truly was before Caleb and Bryn twisted me into someone unstable. Facts matter, she said. So I began searching. I opened the drawer in my bedroom where I kept things I could never throw away. Old birthday cards from Caleb. School photos. His first drawing of our family, me holding his hand. Eric beside us. I set them aside carefully. Under an old scarf, I found a tin box filled with letters. One was from when he was 13. Mom, I know you are tired. Thank you for always getting me where I need to go. I will pay you back someday. My chest tightened. That boy had loved me without hesitation. I put the letter in the evidence pile, even though touching it hurt. Then came the receipts formula. Diapers. Groceries, rent payments, utilities, quiet proof of the things I had given without asking anything in return. I lined them up across the table. A soft knock interrupted me. It was my neighbor, Terry, holding a small notepad. I heard what happened. She said, If you need someone to vouch for you, I am here. She looked over the papers and shook her head. They really sent Adult Protective Services Marina. You shovel my walkway when I cannot. You bring me soup when I am sick. There is nothing neglected about you. She wrote a statement on the spot. Self-sufficient, dependable, capable. Seeing her signature steadied me. After she left, I searched deeper medical records showing stable health. Documents from the caregiving course I took during Eric's final year, and then I found Eric's old letters. One line pierced me. Show him strength, but show him where the line is. I had never shown the line. That evening, Jill stopped by with tea in an envelope. Inside was her statement describing the day Caleb shouted at me in the driveway, how I had stood too calmly, as if used to being hurt. By morning, the table was covered with letters, receipts, statements, timelines, a map of the truth. When Karen called and asked, "Are you ready?" I felt it. I am getting stronger, I said, and I slid the evidence into a box that felt heavier than paper should ever feel. The courtroom was colder than I expected. Not physically, emotionally. People spoke in low voices. Footsteps echoed, and every movement felt watched. Karen rested a hand on my arm as Caleb and Bryn entered with their attorney. Bryn's chin was lifted high. Caleb looked everywhere except at me. When the clerk called our case, we stepped forward. The judge, a woman with sharp eyes and tired patience, scanned the documents in front of her. "Petitioners, state your claim," she said. Their attorney rose. "Your Honor, my clients are seeking formal visitation rights. They are concerned that Ms. Marina Kessler has become unstable, uncooperative, and may withhold familial access without court supervision." I kept my face still, though my pulse thudded in my ears. The judge lifted an eyebrow. "What evidence supports this?" The attorney gestured toward Caleb. "Mr. Kessler will speak." Caleb stood slowly. His voice trembled at first, then steadied as he leaned into the story he had chosen to tell. "Mom has been erratic. She refused to eat at dinner. She reversed a bill to embarrass us. She shuts us out. We are worried she might isolate herself or even harm herself." "Harm myself," I whispered to Karen. Karen squeezed my hand under the table. "Wait." The judge made notes. "Do you have medical documentation of instability?" "Not medical," the attorney admitted, "but there was an Adult Protective Services welfare check." Karen immediately rose. "Your Honor, may I respond?" "Go ahead." The judge said. Karen walked to the evidence table, calm and precise. The welfare check was triggered by an anonymous call. The agents concluded Ms. Kessler was entirely capable and safe. "Here is their written statement." She handed it over. The judge read it, her expression shifting. Karen continued. "Furthermore, the petitioners allege erratic behavior based on a dinner dispute. Yet they fail to mention that they refused to allow Ms. Kessler to order food, told the waiter she would not eat, and attempted to shame her publicly. Here is the waiter's statement." The courtroom rustled. Bryn's face flushed. Karen set another document down. "And here, Your Honor, is documentation of Ms. Kessler providing years of financial support rent payments, utility coverage, childcare essentials while never receiving repayment, acknowledgement, or respect. This speaks to her stability and generosity." Caleb shifted, eyes darting to the floor. Karen's voice softened but did not waver. "My client is not unstable. She is exhausted. She set boundaries for her own well-being, and her son responded with legal retaliation." The judge looked at Bryn and Caleb. "Do you wish to contest this evidence?" Bryn stood abruptly. "She kept receipts to use against us that proves she is manipulative." The judge held up a hand. "Sit down." Bryn's breath hitched as she obeyed. The judge closed the file. "I see no grounds for visitation intervention. No medical concern, no evidence of danger. What I see is a family dispute that does not belong in my courtroom." Her gaze moved to Caleb. He shrank under it. "This petition is dismissed." A gavel struck once. Bryn gasped. Caleb's shoulders collapsed inward. Their attorney quietly gathered his papers. Karen exhaled. "It is over," she whispered. But as Caleb finally lifted his eyes to mine, I felt something inside me pull tight and then release. Not relief, not triumph, loss, not of the case of the boy who used to run home shouting my name. When we left the courtroom, Karen touched my back lightly. "You did well," I nodded. But my eyes stung. Winning had never felt this heavy. The morning after the hearing, my house felt unnaturally still, as if even the walls were waiting for whatever came next. I made tea, sat at the table, and let the quiet settle. My phone buzzed. "Caleb." I stared at the screen for a long moment before opening the message. "You destroyed our family. I hope you are happy." Do not contact us again unless you plan to apologize. My chest tightened. Not with shock, there was none left in me, but with a grief so tired it barely rose anymore. I typed nothing. I reread the sentence once, then again. Then, each time, it felt smaller, like the words were shrinking under the weight of their own cruelty. Another notification appeared, this time a bank alert, a deposit, half of the rent I had covered for them 2 years ago. No note, no explanation, just numbers, sent like a slap meant to be called closure. Then a second message from Caleb: Bryn paid you back. That should satisfy whatever bitterness you have. I set my phone down and pressed my palms against the table. The surface felt cool, grounding. The truth settled with slow finality. They believed money was the wound. They believed repayment could erase disrespect, betrayal, an anonymous welfare report. They believed I cared more about dollars than dignity. My phone buzzed again. I let it ring. When it stopped, a text appeared. Bryn this time. For what it is worth, we never meant for it to go this far. I exhaled. A hollow laugh escaped me, not cruel, just tired. I wrote back one sentence. It went exactly as far as you pushed it. I hit send. Before the typing bubble could appear, I opened my phone settings, scrolled to contacts, and pressed the option I never imagined using on my own child. Block caller, block messages. Then Bryn, block. The silence that followed was different. Not tense, not fearful, clean. I stood and walked to the living room window. The sun was rising over the neighborhood, casting long, soft lines of light across the street. Normal life outside my door, people walking their dogs. Kids waiting for the school bus. None of them knowing that inside this small house, a mother had just accepted an ending she never wanted. My phone lay face down on the table. For the first time in months, it did not feel like a threat. There would be no more explanations to craft, no more accusations to absorb, no more waiting for apologies that would never come. Just me, breathing in a space finally free of their noise. One thread left, thin and frayed, and I had let it go. The locksmith arrived just after noon, a man in his 40s with steady hands and a quiet way of working. I stood in the doorway while he examined the old deadbolt. Want the whole system replaced? He asked. Yes, I said. All of it. He nodded like he had heard that tone before, the mixture of exhaustion and resolve. Metal clicked, tools shifted, and within 30 minutes, he handed me 2 new keys. No one else has copies, he said. Good, I replied. When the door shut behind him, I held the keys in my palm, small, silver, heavier than they looked. They felt like the beginning of something, not protection from the outside, but permission to protect myself. Next, I called my attorney. Karen answered on the first ring. How are you holding up today? Better, I said. I want to update my will. She paused, then said softly, Of course. Come in tomorrow and we will take care of everything. I hesitated before adding, I want Terry and Jill listed as emergency contacts, and I want my estate left to the community center. They could use funding. Karen smiled through the phone. That is generous, and it is yours to give freely. After we hung up, I drove to the community center on Mulberry Street. The parking lot was half full, a small hum of activity inside. I had passed this place hundreds of times, but never stepped in. Today felt like the right day to start something new. A woman at the front desk looked up. Here for a class or volunteer intake, volunteer? I said. The word felt warm in my mouth. She handed me a clipboard. While I filled out the form, a group of seniors laughed nearby, arguing cheerfully over a card game. A few teenagers were stacking boxes in the food pantry. The room buzzed with life, a kind that did not demand anything from me except presence. When I returned the clipboard, the woman smiled. We always need people. You can start next week, if you like. I nodded. I would like that. On the drive home, I rolled down the window, letting the cold Fort Collins air sting my cheeks. It woke something up in me. Something I thought I lost years ago under endless responsibility and quiet misery. That evening, I stood on my porch, watching the sky shift into a soft lavender dusk. The house behind me no longer felt like a reminder of what I had endured. It felt like a place being reclaimed, one boundary, one lock, one choice at a time. Inside, I brewed tea and sat in my favorite chair. No buzzing phone, no accusations waiting to be answered, just quiet, a clean quiet. For the first time in a long while, I whispered to myself, I am still here. Not as someone's mother, not as someone's solution, not as someone's convenience, just me. And the parts of myself I had abandoned for years began returning in small, steady breaths. I drove to Horsetooth Reservoir just before sunset, the sky shifting into deep orange and soft gold as the day thinned out. I parked near the overlook and stepped out slowly, letting the quiet wrap around me. The wind lifted the edge of my jacket, cool against my skin, but not unwelcome. It felt like something in the world was finally making space for me. I stood at the railing, fingers curled loosely around the metal, when my phone buzzed in my pocket. For a moment, I considered ignoring it entirely, but old habits die slower than we want them to. I pulled it out. A single notification lit the screen. Unknown number voicemail. I didn't listen. I deleted it instead. The act was small, but it felt like cutting the last frayed thread of a rope I had been gripping for too many years. Behind me, footsteps approached. I turned slightly and saw Jill walking up the path with 2 thermoses in hand. I figured you might be here, she said. You always talked about wanting to see the sunset more. I smiled, a real one this time. I guess I finally made it happen. She handed me one of the thermoses, hot cocoa. Thought you could use something warm. We leaned against the railing together, watching a thin line of light shimmer across the reservoir's surface. Jill didn't speak for a while, and I was grateful. Silence felt different now. Not something heavy, but something clean. You know, she said eventually, choosing yourself is not selfish. I spent decades believing it was. I replied quietly. Every decision revolved around someone else's comfort, someone else's needs. And now I am learning that I get to have needs too. Jill nodded. It suits you. We stayed there until the sun dipped behind the ridge, the sky fading into a deep purple. When the cold settled in, she squeezed my arm. You are stronger than you think, she said. I looked out over the darkening water, my voice steady. I am finally using my strength for myself. She left a few minutes later, giving me one last smile before heading down the path. I stayed, letting the quiet deepen around me, without the weight of expectation, without the fear of the next betrayal, without the ache of hoping someone might change. When the first star appeared, I whispered to the water below, I choose me. The air felt lighter after that, as if the world had been waiting for me to say it. I took one last sip of cocoa, breathed in the cold night air, and walked back to my car, not as a mother bruised by loss, not as a woman defined by sacrifice, but as myself. And for the first time in years, that was enough. If you've ever had to choose yourself just to survive, tell me in the comments where you're listening from and stay with me for the next story.